This tutorial will take you through the section perspective sequence to create the drawings that you need for the encased volumes studio project. So we've already discussed clipping planes and how to make them, how to set them up, how to enable them in the different viewports, and how to be able to control that. So just a quick reminder, with the clipping plane selected under Properties, you have three options here: Object, Material, and Clipping Plane. Under Clipping Plane, you can control in which viewport the clipping plane is shown in. So right now it's only active in the perspective viewport. We're not seeing anything clipped in the other viewports. Remember that you can flip the direction, so if you want to be showing the other side of what is clipped, you can click on the flip direction. And we also have our shadows turned on, so under the Sun panel, which is under Panels and Sun, we've turned our skylight on. We have set the location either by clicking here and now, or I'm sorry, here and then setting the time of year to June 21st, and being able to control what time of day and what type of shadows are showing as a result, so that we can start to use the sun path at its most extreme in the summer to be able to control, to inform how you're designing your rooms and how you're controlling how the sun interacts with the different spaces. So once you've picked the setting that you would like to show for your section perspective in terms of the shadows, you can hide this or dock it or put it somewhere else. I'm just going to turn it off for now. Our sun is still on, and we're seeing this in the perspective view, as you know, because it's set to rendered. If we were to turn it into shaded or ghosted or wireframe, we wouldn't see the shadows. So you have to make sure that both the sun is on and that your viewport is set to render, so that you can see, get a preview of what the sun is going to see. In the as we discussed during class, the shadows in this current view, and I'm going to maximize this view so you can see it a little bit better. In this current view, the shadows are not being changed by the fact that we're clipping the object. So remember we set that under, with our clipping plane selected, under Display and Edit Rendered Settings. In here, under View, you'll have all of the different display modes. So this is wireframe, shaded, rendered, ghosted, and these correspond with the different display settings in your viewport. If you expand the rendered setting and click on Shadows, at the very bottom you can check to Shadows ignore user-defined clipping planes. So that will keep your shadows looking correct in the section regardless of where you're cutting it from. It'll show the shadows as if it were an uncut object. So it basically allows for you to look inside the object and see where the shadows would be. There is not yet, I have not yet been able to find, after extensive research, a way to control this setting in the actual rendering. I have a couple questions out on that, so when I find out more on that, I will let you know. Like I said, it's a new command in Rhino 5, and so I haven't been able to find anything about how to override that in the actual renderings as well. So we'll see in the rendering that the shadows don't show up quite the same. So what you could do, in addition to doing a rendering of the shadows, is do a screen capture or a print screen of your view, so that you can have that as a reference, and then you can go in and control the shadows manually. We'll look at a couple of other rendering programs over the course of the semester, but I think we'll probably still be having similar issues. Excuse me. So right now, we discussed two different ways of doing the section perspectives in terms of the views, right? So there are, as always, we have options in our viewport. So with nothing selected in the model, when I go under Properties, the properties that are showing are of my viewport itself. So I can change the view from perspective to parallel if I want to look at it without any perspective on. And also when I turn it back to perspective, in the viewport settings, by right-clicking on the perspective name and going down under Viewport Properties, I can control the lens length of the view. So remembering from the different photography sessions that we've had, or the different photography session that we had the other day, shorter lens length is going to give you a wider field of view, so that corresponds to something like a fisheye lens, so it's going to exaggerate the perspective, and a narrower or longer length lens is going to give you a narrower field of view, more like a telephoto lens. So if I want to exaggerate the perspective in this section perspective, I can change this to a smaller number, something like 28. You can start to really exaggerate it and go down much smaller. But by doing that and then zooming in, you start to get a little bit more of a forced perspective, which it's not so much about it being a cool effect, but it's about being able to see more or to see into the model differently. And so the reason that you would choose one versus the other has to do with what you're trying to show in the drawing. So I'm going to leave this now for now, and there's 3 different steps that we want to go through to create a composite drawing that will show the section perspective of this view. And so we'll go through it with this particular drawing or this particular view, and then we'll go through it again, quickly talking about how to take the section perspective with the cut plane parallel to the view plane, so if we were looking at it straight on. So for the one that we're going to do now, I'm going to have it be in this slightly more exaggerated view, just so that we can differentiate from what we'll be doing shortly. So quickly remembering the fact that you often intentionally or accidentally move the view around as you're working, we want to go in and do a saved view. So if you right click on the viewport name under saved views, whatever that is, set view, named views, sorry. In here we are going to click on save as, and we can name this something, right? So we should probably start being consistent with what it's named in the saved view, what the file name is going to be when we export the different drawings, so that everything is related to each other. The more consistent that you can be, the easier it's going to be late at night when you're tired trying to finish up a project, to know what view you need to go into, to know what drawing you need to go into to get what it is that you're trying to get. So I'm going to call this section perspective 1. You might call it long section perspective with summer shadows, something like that, that starts to really tell you specifically what it is. I can't tell you in portfolios how many times I get, plan 1, plan 2, plan 3, and how many different buildings you'll create over the course of your career. You might want to start being a little bit more specific about it. So again, we have now in this saved views and this named views, we've set this view. So if we accidentally move it around or if we intentionally move it around, you can go back in under set view and click on section perspective 1, and it will reset the view for you. Okay, and we can double check that we're in that view. I'm also going to hide the clipping plane. It won't turn it off in terms of what it's clipping, but it will visually give me a little bit more cleanliness in the drawing. So from here, the 3 different things that we want to do are to create a rendering of this view so that we get the shadows, to create a make 2D of the entire object so that we get the vector lines, and then to make a make 2D specifically of the section plane, so specifically of what is cut, so that we can bring all of those things into Illustrator and be able to control the information separately. So the reason that we're doing 2 different vector drawings, one both of the entire object and one specifically of the cut plane, is that you will almost always, or I should say most likely, be using a poche or filling in the section, and you want to be able to quickly select that information rather than having to go in and pick out line by line by line, especially once you start getting into slightly more complicated geometries. So the first one that we'll do, just selecting everything in the drawing, is the simple make 2D. So make 2D. We want to do it of our current view, and you most likely want to maintain the source layers and show the hidden lines. This will allow for you to control the line weights differently, and it just gives you a little bit more option, gives you some more options when you're working in Illustrator. So remembering that we're going to go into the top view and export it from here so that it looks correct when we bring it into Illustrator. So File, Export selected. Slowly process. I'm going to save it to the correct location. I'm going to call it section perspective PCTIVE 1 make 2D, and I want to save it as an Illustrator file so that it saves, it remembers my layer information when I bring it into Illustrator. So I'm going to hit save, and because we're in perspective view, there is no such thing as scale. The drawing is not to scale, so you can bring it in as a snapshot of the current view. Hit OK. And then you can hide this or delete it. Just get it out of the way. Oops, I've accidentally just now reset my section perspective view, so I'm going to go in under set view and reset that. So then, apologize. The next one that we'll do is the rendering of this. So if we right click on the render ball, or under rendering, you can go into render settings. It will bring up the options for creating a rendering. The first is the resolution, which is the kind of quality of the image. I'm going to leave it on a really low resolution for now. Depending on the size that you're printing these out, you would likely want to make it slightly larger, something in the I don't know, 1600 by 1200 range would probably be a good one to start with. The DPI is another way that you can adjust the resolution, so I could leave it on a small size and have it be a higher DPI and still have more information to work with. The background I'm going to leave as, I'm going to turn it into a transparent background so that I can not have to worry about having background information when I'm dealing with it in Illustrator. You can also have it be a solid color, gradient, environment. We talked about these a little bit in class. Everything else should be correct, so I'm going to hit OK, and that's just saving our render settings. And then when I click on render, I want to make sure that I'm in the section perspective view, so I'm rendering the right view. And click on that, and it will pop up and hopefully start rendering our view correctly. Remember, the shadows are going to be slightly different, or they are going to be different in the rendered view, because I haven't yet figured out how we can get it to recognize that, recognize to keep the lighting as if it were a solid object. That's not a setting I've been able to find yet, and I haven't been able to find it online in the message boards anywhere. It should be fairly close. In this one it actually looks very close, but you'll find that it's not quite right. And the background looks black in the rendering because it's transparent, so it's basically just that there's nothing there. When it finishes rendering, you can click on Save, and save this in the correct location as section perspective 1 shadows as a JPEG. Okay. The last bit of information that we need to get from this drawing is the section cut. So I need to go into the hidden portion of my drawing, so Control-Shift-H, that takes me into the hidden view. So these are all the things that are hidden in my drawing. And I'm going to select the clipping plane and hit enter, and that will bring it out as a shown object. Excuse me. If I just type in show, it will show everything, and there may be things that I don't need to have shown at this point. The clipping plane is going to serve as a reference for when I make the section command, and basically I'm going to cut a section here, and then with those objects still selected from the section perspective view, I'm going to make 2D those. So I'm going to take those 2D lines in 3 dimensions and turn that into another 2D flattened drawing. It may be beneficial to make a layer called section. I would recommend it, and have that be the active layer so that your section lines go on this section layer, and then you can control those if you accidentally deselect something, or if you go in. It's also just good layer management. So all of that being said, I'm going to select these objects, section, and I'm going to use my clipping plane as the reference for where I want to draw the section. And you can see here in the section perspective that we now have an outline of all of the areas that were cut. I'm going to hit enter to end the command, and with it still selected, or if you accidentally deselect it, you can right click on section and select objects. I'm going to, with the section perspective view active, I'm going to make 2D. Oops, make 2D. Current view, I don't have any hidden lines, so it doesn't matter if I have that on or not. I'm going to hit OK. And then over here in the top view, I now have those lines flattened out onto the flat kind of drawing plane, the XY plane, and I can export selected those as well. So as an Illustrator file, section, perspective, CTIVE, make 2D. Section perspective 1. I want it to be the same name. Again, snapshot of current view, it's not to scale, so it doesn't particularly matter. I'm going to switch into Illustrator and open, File, Open. And I'm going to start with probably my my Make 2D. I think that would be the one to start with. So section 1, Make 2D. I'm going to double check it looks like I have done this previously. I just want to make sure this is the most current one. Yes. So in Illustrator now, this looks quite small. I can type S to start the scale command and scale it up. I also want to set the page to the correct size. So I can go in under File, Document Setup, and Edit Artboards. And I want this to be tabloid size, which is 11 by 17. Like letter, it's just the standard name for an 11 by 17 page. And I want it to be horizontally oriented, so I want to turn it into landscape. Once that's done, I can click on the black arrow and it will bring me out of that. Selecting the drawing, again, there's not a scale to this, so I can size it as I would like on the page and center it if I want. Turning on the rulers, right click and set it to inches. Before you open any drawings, if you were to, under the general settings, set everything to inches, you wouldn't have to transform it every time, so that might be something that you want to do. Otherwise, you can just right-click and set it as inches every time. And then locate the center of your drawing by having the center reference point selected at 8.5 and 5.5, which is the center of an 8.5 or 11 by 17 page. With everything selected, I'm going to go ahead and change all of the line colors or all of the strokes to black. So I'm going to double click on this, make sure I am on black and hit OK. Otherwise I can control things individually by layers. So in here, if I were to click to the far right of a layer, it's going to select everything on that layer. I want to open up the section file, the line work that's just the section, so I'm going to open that separately. Make 2D. What I need, yep. And I'm going to select this and copy it, Control C, and bring it into Illustrator, Control V. And it should bring it in on its own layer. I'll show you how to set that in class later. I'll show you how to set that in a minute. Otherwise, you can make a new layer and put the objects on it by grabbing the blue, which is the layer that it came in on, and putting it onto this layer 10, which you can now call section. I'm going to bring that layer up to the top just by grabbing it and dragging it towards the top. So grab it and bring it up all the way to the top. And that puts it on the top in terms of the stack order. So that means that, if I have two lines that are in the same location, whichever layer is on the top is the one that I'm going to see first. So that's an important thing when you are dealing with organization like this. After that, you are going to scale it manually to the point where it lines up with the drawing below. And you should be able to snap to certain things. You should have exactly the same. View. Let's see. Am I snapping wrong too here? Here we go. You should have exactly the same geometry and angles and everything, so it should be somewhat easy to get it to line up. And you want to go in and really fine-tune that. You don't want to have really fuzzy lines along the edges, so this would need slightly more fine-tuning, but for our intents and purposes, I'm going to move on. So this section, again, the line is already black, so I'm going to leave that as okay. And then with this selection made, or by going back and selecting these again, I'm going to go in and grab my live paint bucket and set the fill to black. For some reason that doesn't like to keep black, so and then I can go in and make a live paint group and go in and fill the portions that are the section cut, rather than having to go in and pick line by line. So the last thing that I want to bring in are the shadows. So I'm going to make another layer, and this one I want at the very bottom of the stack, so I want it to be behind all of the lines. I'm going to call this one shadows. And with that layer activated, I'm going to place the image file of the shadows, so File, Place, and I'm going to grab the section perspective shadows, and it will place it in the drawing. For some reason my transparent background has imported as black, so we will do a quick shortcut on that. I'm going to turn off the visibility of the other layers and make a quick mask. It might be better to actually just go back into Rhino and export it with a white background. I'm not quite sure why that happened. I will do some research on that. And I'm basically going in, and you would do it again much more carefully, and drawing the outline of the part that I want to show. And then it's a little tough to see because they're both black. Let's turn the transparency on this down so that I can see through it, and make sure that I'm finely lined up over here on the corner, which I am not currently. So I'm going to grab this point and make it line up more with my graphic. And I can double check all of the corner conditions. Looks like I'm not quite lined up over here either. So I'm going to just adjust this slightly. And this outline is basically what you draw over what you want to keep, so I can turn it to a color so that you can see that it's different than the background. And with that and the image both selected, under Object, Clipping Mask, Make, or Command or Control F7, and that will knock out the background for you. It's a little bit of a shortcut in case you accidentally have made a mistake like I have and kept the background in. There must have been a setting in the rendering that I should have turned on. So we will scale this again to, it should match exactly with our line work. So we probably could actually, because they all have the exact same perimeter, double check the sizes of things, or at least the size of the Make 2D lines and the shadows under the transform dialog box, and make sure that they have the same dimensions. Otherwise it's just eyeballing. This is moving fairly slowly because the recording program is on, recording software is on. And I would keep kind of refining this slightly until I got everything exactly where it needed to be. So for now I'm just going to snap to the edges of the line work and assume that that is correct for now. All of our lines we want to make sure are black. For some reason they are not. We want them to be solid and we want them to be black. Thought we changed that already. Oh, I need to select all of these objects. Just holding down Shift and clicking on the right side. Set them all as black. And select everything, Control A. For some reason this isn't doing what I want it to do. Anyway, select everything, Control A, turn it to black. For some reason, I don't know why our stroke isn't automatically updating. I apologize about that. Nothing ever works the way you want it to. Okay, so under color or swatches, you can click on black. That should set everything correctly now, and when I deselect, you see that it shows up, so I'm not quite sure again why that wasn't working. I can go in and select the objects on all of these hidden layers, so hidden here, and hidden here. Holding down Shift to select multiple objects and set those as dashed lines, so under stroke, dashed, and again we want it to be a dash of 3 and a gap of 3 for the hidden lines. You would need to go in and also control the, so I'm going to just undo for a second and make sure that I also am setting the weight of the line. I think the handouts give you specific weights for the different line work. So this by itself, these two, I have the shadows layer turned off, is I believe the line, the type of line that you need, or the type of line work that you need for your studio on Friday. Although we discussed in class, remember that we discussed that you need to also be able to have the dashed lines be white on top of the black. So if you go in and use the cut tool, which is not the slice, the cut, it's buried under one of these things. Let's see. I think the shortcut for it is C, yeah. So it's underneath the eraser tool, the shortcut being C, the scissors tool. You can go in and cut here at that line, cut here at that line, and you should be able to select these lines now. Oh, I cut the vertical line. You want to go in here and I'm going to click slightly to the right of this line. I'm not quite sure. I'm sure there's an easier way to do that. And then just adjust them so that they break on the adjacent line. We'll figure out the correct way to do that. But basically, once you get those things selected, you can turn the color for this line to white. And then when you turn your section back on, you can bring those to the front by moving the section layer actually to the back of the stack. So now you have the white dashed lines on top of the black, and you can go in, and again you'll have to manually control that because the line doesn't care that it's in front of or in back of a black field. You have to be the one that controls those things. So you're now ready to print this. I believe what you need for Studio on Friday is to have the shadows as a reference. So you could also print these, you could print two versions of it, one with just the vector work on, so the section, and then all of the Make 2D lines, and a separate one with the shadows on, or you could have the shadows version just in your computer as a reference. I believe you're going to be doing some drawing exercises with those. The last thing I wanted to show you, just to remind you from class, is that your section perspectives for Studio actually want to be with the cut plane parallel to the view plane, so not showing the section at an angle. So the easiest way to do that is to go to right click on your viewport name and switch it into set view, one of the standard views. So either in my case it would either be back or front. Let's see which is the right section. I believe it's front. I can still have this, it still should be set up as rendered. I can check it versus the back, which is not the side I want. That would be my non-cut side. So I want it to be the front. And then to make this a section perspective, just hide the clipping plane. I want to go in under properties, and with nothing selected, just with the viewport properties on, I'm going to switch this into perspective. And then I'm going to right click on the viewport name under viewport properties, or actually I can do that over here in the properties again. I don't have to go in there and set this to a slightly more exaggerated view. And remember that you can zoom in and out, but if you start panning, you're going to break the view plane will no longer be parallel. So once you get to this once you get your drawing to the point that you want it, and in my case I might want to go in, I'm not seeing shadows in any particular way that I want to be at this point, so I might want to go in once my sun panel opens. So I'm hiding this, panels, sun. I can go in and adjust my time of day to a place where I'm getting better sun angles for the view that I'm looking at. Excuse me. And then close this or dock it somewhere. And I would go through the same process, right? So I would make 2D the line work on this, I would do a rendering of it, and I would still do the, I've already done the section command once on this, so I can use those same lines by clicking on the layer, section, select all, I'm sorry, not select all, section, select objects, and that will select the outline of my section, and again I would make 2D that. I could also just export selected it from this front viewport. It will export it perpendicular to the, or I'm sorry, parallel to the view plane. But if I want to be sure, I can take it through the make 2D process. So it will look the same. It'll just flatten it down onto the ground plane. And send all of those into Illustrator, set them and line them up, and then I should be ready to go. One other thing that you could do as a reference is to, for ease of scaling, is to draw in the view that you're going to be in, kind of a reference plane or a reference line. And if you want it to show up in the rendered view, it's not going to show up unless it is extruded. So I'm gonna draw just basically a rectangle around my object, so it's not interfering with any of the geometry of it. And click. Things are slowing down a bit on my computer. I apologize. It's going to take a second. So click here and over here. You can see that pop up. It should pop up in the other views. Why it's not, I'm not quite sure. Let's see. Here it is. Okay, it's back here. So we're seeing this, let me turn my background color to something different so that you can see render settings. Let me turn this to a light gray. I should be able to see that line here now. And I can extrude it slightly so that it starts to become a three-dimensional object. I just need it to be just even an inch extruded, and then it should render as an object. And basically that's just something that I could snap to in my view here. You don't have to do that, especially in this particular view. You'd be able to scale things specifically to their dimensions, one on top of each other. So when I bring this into Illustrator, I would be able to bring this in at scale. So when you export it, you could export it at the scale of the drawing because it's an orthogonal drawing, so it would be to a particular scale. So that might be, just forget everything that I just said and do it that way. So when you export selected, the perspective view, or the section view, so select objects, make 2D, current view, all of that's correct. In my top view now, when I export selected this, file, export selected, I'm going to save it as something, and I can preserve the model scale, so I would want it to be 12 inches equals 0.1875. Which is my 3/16 scale that my drawings are supposed to be at. Then when I bring it into Illustrator, I don't have to worry about scaling anything up or down. The only thing I'll have to adjust is the rendering, which never is at any particular scale. So that should get you to be able to make all of the drawings that you need for this project at its current point.